one of my first case ever when I got here was a domestic violence where a husband hit a wife 14 times on the head with a hammer and had to sit
Terrible.
there, terrible, horrible, had to sit there at the trauma center and watch the doctor, shave her head and sew her
Yep,
up and
yep.
suture her and sew her up. It was, oh my God, it was heart wrenching. Welcome to Love, Listings, and Legacy, where love, community, and building a lasting impact meet. We are Mony and Sophaline, a husband and wife real estate team, sharing our perspectives on life, real estate, and philanthropy, our stories about resilience and service. Join us each week as we share our journey of life, business, and giving back, all while building a legacy for our family and community. This is Love, Listings, and Legacy, where hearts, homes, and philanthropy come together. Let's get started.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Love, Listings, and Legacy with
Mony Nop?
and Sophaline now. So last time we had a chance to deep dive into Mony's early childhood years, and we feel like it was really important for him to share with everybody so that you could kind of get a sense for the man, and also hopefully there were some lessons in there that you can all take from Mony's journey. So what do you say we dive into the kind of later years of your life?
Let's do it. I'm looking forward to sharing.
Yeah, the fun part.
Yes.
So after growing up in Stockton, California,
Mhm.
and having somewhat of a really rough start to life, obviously enduring the genocide in Cambodia and then moving on to the refugee camps in Thailand, and then coming to America as a young child. Let's go ahead and focus in on maybe your teenage years.
Yeah.
I bet that was a crazy time, right?
Oh, I can't share all the stories.
Right, we got to keep it.
Statute limitation may not be over.
Yeah, we got to keep it rated G as well. So let's dive into like the high schooler
Yeah.
that you were. So what were the teenage years like growing up in Stockton as Mony?
Oh man, like I said, my parents are never around, so I got to do whatever I wanted to do. I just hung out with friends, but I did stick to school quite a bit. I cut a lot of classes, but I always get up early in the morning to study. I've always turned in my homework, so I did really, really well in school. In fact, my cumulative GPA for someone who's only been in the United States for a few years through high school was 3.57 GPA, which is not bad. So I thought I did pretty well there. But as a teenager, I just got to do what I wanted to do. I went all over the place. I rode bikes. I walk. I hunt rabbits with just bare hands with a bunch of friends. Caught a bunch of rabbits. There's a story behind that we can go over later. But I was just free, and I was just curious. I've always been interested in learning. I play a little bit of badminton in high school. I didn't get really, really involved in sports or any academia on science or anything like that. The math class I took was Algebra 2. I think I did horrible. I think I got a C or a D in it. And the geometry, I got a C in it. But after that, I've never really taken any more math classes. I think part of it is because when I was going through school, when you get to the math and science, and when you have to interpret all those questions that are asked of you, you don't have a strong language skill, you're not going to get it. And when you don't get it, you get bored. You're like, oh man, I'm stupid. When it turned out now as an adult who became better educated, I think that I could take on those questions much more, and I could have a much more depth understanding of those questions. I could find more ways to find answers to those questions versus just thinking that I was just dumb and stupid at the time. So
Yeah, I think a lot of our Cambodian American friends that came during your era, I think first of all, looking back at, you didn't have education until you arrived in the US. And so typically here in westernized nations, usually you start your education, kindergarten,
yeah,
when you're 5,
right.
and you start building the basics of, like the alphabet and numbers and
Yeah.
things like that. And I think for you, it was just a little bit more challenging because you didn't have that, right?
Yeah, you always feel like you're behind. For example, the reason why I stole the dictionary from third grade from Mrs. Charlie Young's class was that I wanted to learn. So what happened was, my first year, second year in the United States, when I went home with my homework, who's going to help me?
Right.
I'm the only one that spoke English, right? Or enough, right? So I'm the only one that did the translation for your parents at the age of 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, right? So no one's going to help you.
Hmm.
And where do you go to get help, right? It's just like you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know what a library look like. Or if you do know what the library look like, how do you get there without transportation when your parents are
Hmm.
around?
Yeah.
So, and that
A
was
lot of
that's
challenges.
a lot of challenges.
Hmm. Yeah, and so, obviously you went to Tokay High
I
School
did.
in Lodi.
Hmm.
Yeah, were there any pivotal moments in high school or fond memories of high school? Like, did you go to like any of the homecoming games or participate in anything? What was your high school years like?
High school years, I don't have a lot of fond memories. I mean, I remember taking Mrs. Peak, my French class. I took 4 years of French in high school. I did really, really well.
Hmm.
Aced throughout all my French class, so I became bilingual as a result. But I never really went to homecoming game. I didn't really understand what football was all
Mm,
about. I've gone to a couple of dances, but we actually walked
mm.
from Stockton all the way to Lodi, which is about 8 miles.
Yeah,
And
that's
sometimes
far.
we would walk back home. We would get home at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
walk in the darkness, which is kind of crazy, right? But but mainly I stuck to the academia side, and I did my work, and I got help where I needed. And then sometimes you have to cheat a little bit with your friends. You do so
Yeah,
because
yeah.
and sometimes and you're probably one of those where your friends probably cheated off of you. I had friends that are really, really much smarter than me.
Yeah.
Like, hey, can you do my homework for me? I'll pay
Mhm.
you, right? So
Mhm.
whatever you need to do, but that's what you have to do in order to
Mhm.
pass. But overall, I think I had a good grasp on education and the importance of it. That's why I get up at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning if I have to study for a test to make sure I study and turn in my homework and study for the test at the same time. That I've done well, so well enough to make sure that I'm able to go on to the next step, right? The community
Well,
college and all that.
I was just going to say that that's pretty impressive for
Yeah,
someone who had to kind of, as a child and even as an adolescent, having to kind of parent yourself and making sure you did do your own homework and things like that. Whereas now, if your family situation was a little bit different, then who knows? Like you could have excelled a little bit more just because if you have the structure and you have, even if mom and dad didn't speak English, because like my parents couldn't help me with my homework either, but at least like they were there to just support, or if like I didn't understand something, then they would maybe try to find like one of their friends' kids who was older
right.
to tutor me and things
Yeah.
like that. But I still think, nevertheless, it was really
I grew up really,
impressive.
really rough. So I mean, around
Yeah.
a lot of people that got into trouble, a lot of gambling and gambling addict and alcohol. My parents, I grew up in a domestic violence household, and I'll talk about one of the pivotal moments of my life at the age of 17 as well. But yeah, it was rough. It
Yeah.
was really, really rough. You felt alone. You didn't have anybody to help you because no one could, or you didn't know where to go to get help. So,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
made it. So
Yeah. And so, you know, let's kind of look at what really inspired you to kind of change your life around,
yeah,
because if I recall, growing up in Stockton during the 90s was pretty rough.
right.
Obviously I grew up there, and obviously you are a product of your environment unless you really really fight to like get away from that environment. But yeah, the 90s was all about gangs, and there was like plenty of that, and drive-by shootings and the violence. And Stockton didn't have a lot of like resources as it does maybe now. So what was it for you? What was it for Mony that really clicked, and you just made a decision? Could you maybe share with the audience, like how does one person go from growing up in that environment to kind of finding your path and navigating through life's challenges?
Well, first of all, growing up as teenagers, like I said, was rough. But I had my first job at McDonald's. I worked for 3.5 years. I didn't even know what a cheeseburger was. I knew what a hamburger was. I didn't know what a cheeseburger or a chicken sandwich was. But 6 months later, I wanted to learn. I learned how to do everything in the store. Became employee of the month. I work at Domino's, so where I deliver pizza. I was the number one delivery driver for them as well. I learned how to hustle. I learned all the addresses. Learned how to tell where all the different blocks in the map and neighborhood and whatnot, and you know which one tips you and which one won't. And I would just make so much money just delivering pizza. And I also work out before, even during the teenage years, I work out in the fields with the Mexican Hispanic, and worked all the way to Oregon as a child, and picking every fruits and vegetables from onions to garlics to cherries to everything you can imagine on a blackberries, boysenberry, strawberries. I've done it all, and I used to find myself sleeping in a rows of the cucumbers and the cherry and all that because from exhaustion that I would sleep in a row. I would make a $20 a day, and sometimes at the camps where my father, and like for example in Oregon, would teach us how to gamble, we would lose all the money we just made for the day, which is kind of crazy. But that's what life was. It was really hard, but you just have to overcome it and continue with it.
Absolutely. So, can you share with us that moment? Going back,
Hmm.
to kind of like understanding. Because for me, like I want to understand what motivates someone to completely change their life. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm looking
Yeah,
to
so there's
hear.
two things that came to mind. One was I was lucky enough that in my 10th grade I met the police captain, Captain Hansen, who became the chief of police for the Lodi Police Department. He taught a class on civic engagement. So all we had to do in this class was to cut out newspaper and talk about police work. And I got really interested in as a result of it. But my first impression from his class, when we talked about all these different things that police do, was that it was about kicking ass and taking names. I'm
Mm,
like, oh my God, I can do that. But I never knew there was a written test side of it, that you have to pass the test to get in the police academy and then get in to become a police officer. Yeah,
mhm,
of course, you got to pass the police academy too. Police academy was hard, but that's what I wanted to do at the age of 16. And, um, and I want to become a police officer, but it took me 4 long years. 4 long years. I took my test everywhere, pretty much every city in Northern California in order to get that practice exam because I didn't know what Barnes and Noble was. I didn't know antonyms and synonyms and sentence structure. I had to learn all that throughout. And I had to study at the end of each test before I turn them in. So this way I could try to memorize as much as I can so I could pass the test. 4 long years later, I finally did pass the test and passed the test by 3 points. And I was asked to be in an academy. I get into the police academy, had to borrow the police uniform and whole 9 yard, and learn how to, iron your clothes, spit shine your shoes. And now, mind you, I was going to the academy at nighttime and working in the daytime full time as well, which is a lot, right? At the age of 20, 21, almost 22 years old. But another pivot moment happened in my life was when I was 16 and a half years old. I remember what contributed to this was I was getting off of work at McDonald's at the time, and I called my father to come pick me up. He was too busy gambling; he wouldn't come pick me up. So I had to walk home in my McDonald's uniform, blue and gray striped uniform, all the way for like 5, 6 miles. You know where the mall is, all the way down to Hammer and West Lane over there. That's like 5, 6, 7 miles. So I walked home, and then right before I got home, I got chased by a pit bull. I had to climb over the top of a car, waited there for a little while until the owner called the pit bull in, and then I was able to continue to walk home and finally reach home. I remember how mad I was. I'm like, man, I couldn't believe my
mm,
father left me like this. A few months later, I saved up enough money. I bought my own car. I drove. I remember stopping at the red light at March Lane and Rosemary area and or Pacific. I'm sorry, March Lane Pacific. I was stopping at a red light and look at the light. I'm like, I remember just sitting there, really emotional about it. And I said, I don't want to be like my father. I have to do something in my life.
mhm,
So at that moment, I said, I got to be better. I
mhm,
said, this is what I'm going to do. I just so determined that I'm going to become a police officer. That's why I did all those things to pass the test, and I finally passed my test, and I finally
mhm,
got in and then graduated.
mhm,
But there are other things that happened before I graduated. For example, I got in a fight during the police academy. And during the fight, I got beat up pretty good. And then a few weeks later, my house got broken into, and then the guy I got in a fight with, his house got shot at. Same thing happened 2, 3 weeks later, and his house got shot at again. And at the time, I already became a reserve police officer for the city of Stockton. They thought I did it. They thought I was
yeah,
involved in a drive-by shooting suspect while going to the police academy.
yeah.
Now, that evening, they came to my house an hour later after I came back home from the police academy and searched my home. And they took my gun and badge away from me for 6 months. And then finally, I cleared my own name by taking all the lie detector tests at different cities and finally passed all the tests. And then Stockton PD looked at the results and cleared me. And on December 4th, 1995, I became a Livermore police officer. And that's the day that changed my life and the life of my family.
I'm just sitting here listening, and again, because we are married, I've heard this story probably like 100 times. just because through hearing you tell people, but every time, you really get emotional about it. And I think it's also important to note that sometimes, as individuals, it's the choices that you make in life. I always tell people that you cannot choose the circumstances that you're born into, but you can make a decision as to where your life is going to go. So when you're sharing that story, what I'm thinking about is, you used the anger in a way. You used
I would
anger
say a
or
chip on my
resentment.
shoulder.
Well, that the chip on the
Yeah,
shoulder
yeah,
comes because of the anger, but I think you were angry because you were like, man, like I don't deserve this, and why do I have to, like, walk home? Why couldn't my dad just pick me up,
that's
kind
right.
of thing?
Yep.
But I think about, like, if dad were to pick you up that day, who knows where you would be today. So in a way, I just want to let you know that for whatever reasons at that moment, it was a sign from God or the universe or whatever. It was that moment for you to be like, Mony, you need to be better. And if your dad had picked you up, things could have been very different. But at that moment, your dad was not there to pick you up. And instead of, turn towards not so healthy things, you decided that moment that you were going to be better. And I think that has helped shape who you are today. And then becoming a Livermore police officer on December 4th, 1995, and joining, a brand new community and essentially leaving that, as we say, like life behind, because when I think about it, you could have gone either way. You could have like been all about that thug life, or you could have been like who you are today.
Oh, had I been caught for some of the things that I was involved in, I mean, not to hurt anybody, anything like that, but just, just hanging out with friends that are
Yeah, the wrong
into the
people.
wrong
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I could have been caught up easily, would have gotten my 3 square meals per day in some type of prison somewhere, because that was my destination. And now when you look back at it, it goes, wow, I'm the exception to the rule that I made it. But becoming a police officer at the age of 22 years old was pretty young, and
Yeah.
just literally just left the rough life in Stockton and come here to Livermore and become a police officer. Really, really changed everything. Changed the way I see things, to see how other people live. So different from Stockton and Livermore. So different from each other. One is I'm around all my community members who knows what all kinds of things are involved in. You come here, it's much more safer, and it's larger ethnic groups of Caucasian here than fully, mainly immersed in the Cambodian community.
Yeah. I mean, plainly put, I mean, you left a community that you felt like was, I'm not even a community, but probably just the environment. I would
Yeah.
say the
Oh yeah.
environment,
Absolutely.
just the environment that you were in, because um, although I grew up in Stockton too, there were different environments with, even within our small Cambodian American community, there were pockets of that. And it just was a luck of the draw, which neighborhood or which
Absolutely.
community in
Yeah.
Stockton you grew up around. So now that you're here in Livermore as a police officer, obviously you're like 22 years old, you're like in your 20s. I thought it'd be really interesting if you could share maybe some funny or maybe anecdotal kind of memories of like you as a Livermore police officer. Now, mind you, this is 1995. This is during the era of kind of like affirmative action was beginning. I was in high school and I remembered hearing about affirmative action, as a high school student. I think I was a sophomore, junior. And hearing about it and then kind of understanding what some of the issues were. But maybe you could share with us, what was that like as a new police officer in Livermore? And also, obviously, your the color of your skin isn't something that you could just hide over with the uniform. What was that experience like?
Yeah, no, when I got here, the town was a lot of cowboys here. That's what Livermore is known for,
Yeah.
still today, right? But it's changed quite a bit. But when I arrived here in 1995, I was the second Asian police officer in the history department. Joe Wynn, who's Vietnamese American, he and I worked together at San Joaquin Delta College Police Department together. He was here 8 months before me, and that's how I learned about this city. And I just drove through here a couple times, cutting classes and hanging out in San Jose at high schools and whatnot down there. But that's how I knew about Livermore. I really don't know anything about it. But he said he applied, and I applied, and sure enough, a month and a half later, I got selected as a police officer here. But it was challenging because I've only been in the United States now 11 years after I arrived from a war zone and refugee camps, right? So English language was not my strong suit, but I was fearless. I remember some of my training officers goes, Mony, you can't write to save your life. They actually, because they want me so bad because I was fearless. I didn't care how big that person was. If I had to chase somebody, if I had to knock down somebody, if I have to,
Mhm.
grapple with somebody, if I have to tackle somebody, I would do it in a heartbeat because I
Yeah.
was fearless. But they saw that fearlessness, but they also saw that, hey, you know what? If we teach him how to write better, they actually bought me a grammar book to teach
Mhm.
me. I couldn't
Yeah.
get past the past present tense. I saw a suspect go into Safeway concealed. I would put ed, saw, right. I would just, everything was in the past
Yeah.
tense. I couldn't
Yeah.
understand the past present tense. So like, it's an oxymoron when you think about it, right. But it was hard. It was really, really hard to learn. But I tell you what, 3.5 months later, I was on my own. It's on my own as a
Yeah.
solo police officer. They passed me. And Wayne Jacobs, Aaron Cole, and Kevin Uptedell. Those are my three field training officers. And
Wow.
it was cool. It was cool. And I got to work nights with all the old guys, kept them all up, and they used to pull me aside and say, "Mony, shut the f up. You're making us all look bad. You're keeping us awake and whatnot." But I just love my job, and it was the
Mhm.
greatest thing. Now, mind you, the comparison is this: when you think about it, before I became a police officer, I was a bilingual aide in a classroom. I was making $9.75 an hour. I came here, I was making $40 an hour. You're talking about a shift, man. You're talking about a change. I'm getting like 4 times more than I ever made.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. At 22 years old, a boy from a little ghetto.
Well, this is also back in the 90s. So obviously the wages and everything has
Yeah.
changed.
And by the way, at the time, when one police officer position open would have 300 to 400 to 500 people apply for it,
Mhm.
versus now where they can't get anybody to get hired. They have to
Mhm.
offer all kinds of incentive to get the people in. The whole industry has changed so much on the law enforcement side.
Yeah.
But I was really, really lucky that Livermore gave me that opportunity. That's why I love serving in this community.
No, that's wonderful, and also too, I think just having met some of your former colleagues, and especially getting to be in the community, and oftentimes I get some of your students from your DARE program. Maybe you could share with everyone what was that like as a DARE officer. I remember in fifth grade, I had a DARE officer as well, and it was drug was it
Drug
drug
abuse,
drug abuse
resistance
resistance
education.
education. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, first of all, I served a total of 17 years. Of the 17 years, I spent 12 or 13 years on patrol, 3 years on as a DARE instructional officer and coordinator, and 2 years undercover. So I got to do a lot of undercover work in Stockton and in Oakland, dressing up as a bad guy, buying drugs all over the place. I was scary as heck, but that's something I got to do. Um, but as a dare officer, I thought that was probably the most memorable thing. In fact, I just got off the phone earlier from one of my dare students who wants to buy a house now. They're 30, 31, 32, 33 years old now, so it's kind of cool. But it was really neat because when they asked me to take over the program, they never had a coordinator for this program. We started with small. We started with 8 schools. By the time I was done in 3 years, I went to 21 schools,
That's
including
incredible.
middle school, high school. I'm sorry, including middle school, elementary school, and also private schools to bring into the conversation. And we were able to teach this program all over the place. We expanded. We add from one officer to like 4 officers in the DARE program. And we got to know the community. The community got to know us. And as a result, we got a lot of support for the police department. I think it was one of the best programs that the police department offered. It was one of the best assignments I've ever had. And
That's
then here's the
mhm.
best part. Some of my favorite stories is, in fact, I wrote a book as a result called Officer MNOP and Me: How Police Officers Serve Community on and Off Duty. The reason why it's called Officer MNOP is because, one, it's my first initials M, NOP is my last name Nop, so MNOP. Or what happened is the kids, when I'm not teaching in the classroom, I would go read to the kids. I love reading to kids because I never got to read as a child. And or I get to play four squares or basketball with the kids. So the kids would
Yeah.
come to me and goes, Officer MNOP, autograph my hand. So they, the second and third grader, they love doing that. So that's
Mhm.
how that book came about. It's Officer MNOP and Me. You can find it on Amazon, by the way.
Mhm. So,
Mhm.
as a DARE officer, what was the best part about being around the schools?
was just basically building a relationship. My part of it was not only to teach the curriculum, the 17 weeks curriculum to prevent kids from using drugs, right? Say no to drugs. But it's also a perfect opportunity for us as police officers to be in the public to establish a relationship with the from the young fifth graders all the way to middle school to high schooler, because they have to see us as normal, regular people as well, right? Because what happened, if you were to drive down the street today and all of a sudden you see a police car, what's the first thing come to mind? Something's wrong, right? Well, not everything is wrong when you see a police car. We might be there to help somebody. We might be there to take a report. We might be there to be part of a community event. We don't know. But a lot of times when we see a police car, we think of something that's bad that may have happened, when in fact it may not be true at all.
Yeah, I think it's also really interesting perspectives as well. I think of how you look at to your point, when you see a police car, if you grew up in a pretty safe city community where crime isn't a big thing, maybe when you see a police officer, it's a completely different experience versus if you grew up in a more socioeconomically disadvantaged community and you're used to seeing the police when something is wrong.
Yeah, well,
And
I
so
mean, yeah,
you grow up with the stigma that when
absolutely.
you see a police officer that, oh my God, like someone's getting arrested
That's
or
right.
a crime just happened,
Yeah.
someone just got violated, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I'm one of those, I am one of those poor kids that grew up in those type of neighborhood as well. I mean, I've been pulled over for no reason at all because there was some drive-by shooting and I didn't even fit the suspect, and then got pulled. And one time I got slapped and thrown in the back of a police car and just had to wait there a while until they let me go when in fact I had nothing to do with it. So things like that happen, right? But I'm hoping that, when I came here as a police officer, that I've changed that as well, where I look out for the interests of those moments and times when justice need to be served, or the wrong has to be corrected or had to be righted, and then I had the opportunity to do that to protect the victims. That's what I get to do, and
Yeah.
that was special, is to make sure that you protect the weak, you protect the poor, you protect the underserved, you protect the people that have been wrong, and then making sure that they as victim, that you look after them, and that justice is served on the prosecution side to make sure that people don't do that, that won't happen to them again, and the people that need to get prosecuted. So
Yeah, one of the things I'm very sensitive to, obviously, being married to you and also just having friends and being around friends who are married to first responders, there is a certain level of high stress, and being a police officer can be very stressful, and also can bring home a lot of vicarious trauma because obviously you see a lot of horrible, horrible things. I feel like when you are a police officer, most of the time you're dealing with good citizens, you're helping people out, but if you are in a really rough city, you're mostly dealing with a lot of negative
yeah,
things. How have you been able to find ways to cope? Maybe as a police officer, like to so that you don't bring a lot of that trauma and you don't bring a lot of that frustration home.
it's hard, because no matter what city you work in, even Livermore, it used to be, we don't have as many crimes. We have a lot of little crimes, but we don't have a lot of big crimes as other big cities. But even then, you see everything you could imagine. For example, I had one. I mean, I still impacted by today. There's a location I can't go here in town, because one of the distraught person got in a fight with his soon-to-be ex-wife, and then when I came across him, he shot himself right in front of me.
Mm,
That's something
that's
that
very traumatic.
yeah. Or I had one where a car accident happened. Mom was not paying attention, hit a telephone pole, buckled the telephone pole, caught on fire, and then the baby's in the back was in a car seat and was installed properly, and the baby died as a result.
Mm,
So when you get
very
there,
tough.
here's a dead baby.
Yeah.
Or you see, like, one of my first case ever when I got here was a domestic violence where a husband hit a wife 14 times on the head with a hammer, and I have to sit
Terrible.
there. Terrible, horrible. Had to sit there at the trauma center and
Mm,
watch the doctor, shave her head and
mm-hmm.
sew her
Yep.
up and
Yep.
suture her and sew
Mm-hmm.
her up. It was oh my god, it was heart wrenching. Or you
Mm-hmm.
see the rape victims,
Yeah.
just something happened, and you as a male officer, you calling Tri Valley Haven, for example, for the advocacy side to come help you to deal with these things. There's just so much,
Mm-hmm.
that you deal with, and it's a high stress job. For the most part, it's pretty cool, but at the same time, when in this job, you just look for the 5% of excitement when you're getting pursuits and chases and
Mm,
foot pursuit and car chases and all these other exciting
yeah.
things. I get to be on a SWAT team for several months. I got to jump off helicopters and rappelling off a 100-foot building, doing Australian rappelling where the head comes down first versus the feet come down first. I mean, I got to do some extraordinary things and fun things, but it really, really surely impact you. And that's why police officers have one of the highest suicide rate and one of the highest divorce rate.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, right? Because it's hard because once you become a police officer, it's usually the job change you after 5 years. You become a
Mhm.
completely different person. And sometimes you deal with your spouse, you deal with so much when you get home and you just want to relax with now the spouse say, hey, I just want you to take care of the kids or help me with this, help me with that. Or like,
Sure.
I don't want to deal
Yeah.
with that anymore
Yeah.
after I dealt with people all day long. So
I'm sure now a lot of departments do focus on mental health and wellness for officers because
absolutely.
you're so busy as an officer responding, protecting, serving, helping, rescuing other people, but who's going to do it for you? And sometimes
Or your
you,
family, who's going to do it for you and your family. And that's
so
what
to
you would
that
neglect.
point,
Hmm.
yeah, to that point, and I've been on the receiving end too, and I've shared this with you too. When I was when I was younger, I was in a long term relationship with someone who was a police officer, and it's really hard because you don't know how to support them, and but yet they can come home from a very tough day and they completely just release it on you, and it's not okay. So that's why I was just asking you, like, how do you find ways to cope? And this is something, obviously, as you know, I'm on the board of the Tri-Valley Haven, and this is something we talk about for the counselors, and you mentioned Tri-Valley Haven earlier.
Hmm.
So, you know as a board member, we often get reports from our executive director, on the wellness of the staff. Because if you are a counselor and you are responding to survivors of sexual assault, rape, domestic violence, you're listening to just these horrible, horrible things happen to these people. And then what do? You go home and you suppress it, and then something happens, maybe your children spill the milk, or the dog maybe had an accident in the house and you don't know how to handle it, and what happens is you just
Blow
lose
up.
it, you
Yep.
blow up.
Yep.
And that's not fair to the dog.
Yeah.
And it's always like this,
Yeah.
I've heard. It's just like, okay, you get frustrated, like you kick the dog goes and does this, and it's a ripple effect of like what happens to people. So that's why I think it's important, that you have an outlet. And I think that's something that now in 2024, I think
Yeah.
people are more
Yeah.
aware of that.
Absolutely. Looking back, there's a lot of things I would do differently, but of course I didn't know. The other thing is that when you first start, there's so much overtime in police work. So the officer end up, working 4 days on, 4 days off, and on days 4 days off is supposed to be off, but they end up working 3 out of 4 days, maybe even 4 out of 4 days. Now you're looking at, if they work out of 4 out of 4 days off, now that you're looking at 12-day shift, right?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of stress, and you
Oh
carry all
yeah,
that, right?
your body
So,
just.
well, guess what? Who's the burden's on? The burden is on the wife or significant other taking care of the kids, right? They don't see their father, they don't see their mother working at all the time, right? So there's a lot of impact, and then that needs to change. In fact, for the longest time, well, first of all, when I went to St. Mary's College night school, I got my degree. In order to finish my degree, I had to do a research on critical incident stress debriefing. I brought that as a policy at the Livermore Police Department, which is still in existence today, where when we have a major incident of a shooting, or like in this case where the guy shot himself in front of me, and we have to stay there with the body until the morning, and we collect evidence from the body that's we've already traumatized by him shooting in front of us. Now we have to stay here with the body and then collect evidence from that. Imagine that, right? Because you didn't have other officers. So what we did was, because of all that stuff was going on, there was a lot of radio traffic, from what's going on outside. We have to call a CHP helicopter and come in. There's just so much stuff going on. We don't know everything. So we have to bring everybody to come together, kind of share what their roles were, and in return, when you get to see the whole picture, you begin to understand.
Mhm.
Not you were impacted, by you impact by different ways, but not you don't have to take on the burden on everything else that
Yeah.
happened at that incident. So, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, 17 years of serving and protecting the Livermore community. I know that a lot of community members often share with me, they obviously knew you from back when you were Officer Nop. And to me, it's very rewarding to meet your students who still remember you to this day and actually come up and say, wait, is Mony your husband? I'm like, yeah, it depends. Like, did he give you a ticket? And sometimes they say, oh, no, he was my dare officer. But it's interesting to see like their eyes light up. And to me, that shows that you had some impact on their lives as fifth graders, because when you're in fifth grade,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
don't
yeah. You don't
remember
remember. Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
all the substitute teachers
Yeah.
or coaches. But one thing we do remember is our dare officer as fifth graders, because I still remember mine.
Oh, yeah. We spent a lot of time, 17
Yeah,
weeks together. That's a
yeah,
long time.
yeah. So I just want to kind of wrap up by saying that you definitely made a profound impact on your dare students, and the ones that I get to meet today, they definitely speak very highly of you. And also a lot of community members, maybe you responded to their homes at some point in time, they still remember you. So I guess thank you for your service,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm sure that you'll share more police stories with us in future episodes. But I think for this segment, it was really truly an honor to hear you share about your story from Stockton and growing up really rough to then, overcoming your challenges and becoming the second Asian American police officer in the city of Livermore. And, I hope that hearing your story, I hope that our listeners will, um, find some value in kind of hearing your story, and that sometimes you have to overcome those challenges and not let the circumstances that you're born with determine where you're going to be. So any last final words before we wrap up this segment?
No, again, thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of my life story with you. There's many others. There's many more outside of now from, when I left the PD in March 12th to now. There's a bunch more. But on that note, I'm just simply proud and honored to have served Livermore PD. I don't take that lightly when we put on uniform. I want to be the most professional. I want to be the most thoughtful. I want to be the most caring and also sensitive to the needs of the community. When I come to a scene, I want to make sure things are done properly. I used to preach a little bit at calls, especially in death calls. In fact, death calls probably taught me the greatest lessons of my life. And that means that I remember seeing some people showing up for someone who had just passed, or a lot of people showing up for someone who just passed. And what that taught me was that you make a difference while you live,
Mm-hmm.
and then people show up when you're gone to
Mm-hmm.
respect you, to pay that final respect. And that's something I'll never forget. And I used to send note cards or preach to the family a little bit and ask this profound question, would you, I see that this person had made an impact on you. How are you going to live your life as well to make the impact on others, so other could come and remember you when you're gone too? So those are the profound questions I often ask and often preach about when I bring the families together at death calls. But it's been an honor and a privilege to serve as a Livermore police officer. And then thank you for taking me in this community where I didn't know anything about this community, but I just come to love so much. So
Absolutely. And I think that touches on legacy and what legacy means for you. And your legacy is your 17 years of service as a Livermore police officer, and the legacy that you left behind with your DARE students and also the community members that you serve. So thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to hearing about your next chapter of your life. And we want to just say thank you so much to everyone for tuning in.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Love, Listings, and Legacy this week. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Join us next time as we continue to navigate the path from adversity to success, one property and one purpose-driven decision at a time. Thanks for listening.